This is a More Complete Beast podcast where we discover and distill strategies to drive the needle forward on your life. The first episode we had on this podcast was called The Lost Millennial Male. We talk about the prevalence of addiction in society. It's actually spiked up. We're seeing a record number of overdoses. We're seeing a record number of addictions since the COVID-19 pandemic. This is something that if it isn't touching you, it's touching a loved one. Addiction can ruin the trajectory of your life. And we want to solve that today. So sitting across from me is a good friend of mine, Luke McHugh, who has battled and is beating one of the hardest addictions to beat, and that's an opioid addiction. So today, I want to extract some information that you can use if you're dealing with this or a loved one is dealing with this, that you can implement in your life so you can move forward with your life and actually drive the needle forward on your life so you're living the life that you deserve. So the first thing I want to ask, and just a little background, I walk my dog every single night, unless he's hurt. Like he's got a paw thing going on, so I did it by myself last night. But I walk my dog every single night, Monday through Sunday. And one thing I notice on Sundays is garbage night. And this is kind of weird, but I'm looking at people's garbage as I walk by for two reasons. Number one, my dog's always trying to eat the garbage, so I have to prevent him from doing that. Number two is because it kind of gives you an insight into how these people live. And you can see, okay, this person bought a new TV, this person got a new chair, a new couch. You can see kind of how they eat. It's strange, but it's something that I've been observing. And one thing that I notice, this is a nice neighborhood. It is. And there's certain houses that I walk by, and I notice their garbage is loaded with wine and spirits. You see bourbon, you see wine bottles that no one person, two people, five people should be drinking. So I'm walking by this house. It's, the person's a doctor. They know better, right? But they always have consistently more bottles of liquor and wine than they should. So the first question I have is addiction something that's prevalent across the income spectrum? And the second question I have is, if it is, correct me where I'm wrong on any of these things, if it is something that's problematic, are the people who are successful the hardest to reach because they can rationalize their addiction with the outward success that people see in their life?
Great question. Hi, guys. I'm Luke McHugh, like Alex introduced me. I'm stoked to be here. I was honored when Alex asked me to come on his podcast, not only just to talk a little bit about my story, but because I look up to Alex and what he's done with his life and business and just his mentality and his self-discipline. That's why I came to work out with you in the first place.
Hell yeah. I appreciate it, man.
No problem. Yeah. So I'd like to start by saying, in terms of like doing something like this, like anytime that I've spoken on recovery or with addiction, like in the last so many months, like it really starts after you get a year clean and sober that you get asked to speak. You have to have a year to give your lead at meetings or to go into rehabs or to go into homeless shelters or psych wards. I've spoken at all those. And anytime I've done it, it's kind of been like within the recovery community. And I see like a lot of people in recovery who are pretty vocal and they say, we recover out loud, like basically on Facebook or Instagram, and I don't really do that. I'm not saying that it's because I'm ashamed of being in recovery, because I'm not, or that I was an addict. But it's more so because I think that maybe sends a message like, look at me, I'm clean and I'm doing so great. But this for me today is different because I see it as an act of service to reach a listener that might be struggling or have a family member that's struggling, because, addiction's so rampant in America and in the world that you either know somebody that's dealing with it or you're dealing with it yourself. You know what I mean? Whether it be drugs or like other addictions like you spoke of. So this was a good opportunity for me to kind of step outside of the 12-step fellowship and the recovery community and Narcotics Anonymous, and which is the fellowship that I go to, and kind of reach like more everyday listeners and stuff like that. So I want to clarify, why this is a cool opportunity for me. But in regards to your question about that stuff, man, it's like, I'll start by saying this, like I go to NA mainly for my recovery. That's where my sponsor is. That's where the people that I've got linked up with. Definitely had issues with alcohol, but it didn't bring me to my knees like narcotics, like drugs did. So NA just seemed like the appropriate place to go for me. But when it comes to AA, which is Alcoholics Anonymous, which most people have heard of, and the founders of the 12 steps, my point that I'm getting at is that when you tell me the story of the people in the neighborhood with all the bottles of beer and this and that, and you ask, it's a nice neighborhood. Most people in here are probably successful and professionals, and they're drinking. And does that justify their addiction or their drinking or their drug use because they're, accepted in society? What I've been taught in recovery is that social acceptability does not equal personal recovery. You know what I mean? Because since you're doing good on the outside, it doesn't really give you like a pass to go do whatever you want. Tying it back into the AA thing, what happens is in AA, specifically with alcohol, people tend to get clean and sober much later in their life because it's so accepted and it's a part of their daily routine. And they might go out with Cohen, might be a lawyer, but they go out to the bar every single day after work. I know people who do that. And it kind of just, spirals out of control. Maybe it doesn't, but it's just kind of like, that's not that big of a deal. Like, but it's not a good thing either, But with narcotics and with addicts compared to alcoholics, which let me clarify is the same exact thing. It's just
different substance.
In NA, there's a reading that talks about alcohol as a drug. It's a liquid drug. We don't differentiate. We don't like mince words, like all inclusive. It's like the NA thing. It's a little more of an adapted version of AA, but people tend to get clean earlier because drugs bring you to your knees faster. They're not socially acceptable. You can't go out and do Percocet in public. You know what I mean? You can't go out and do heroin or cocaine like in public. I mean, you can have your small group of friends, but you hide it, So most people I see that get clean in NA, like my home group personally, in where I go, it's in Turtle Creek, and I'll protect the anonymity as I'm supposed to of some of the members. Sure. But there's guys there with 49 years is the most time clean. And I didn't understand that. In my very first meeting I went to, there was a guy there with like 33 years clean. And I'm like, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? Aren't you cured from this? Like, don't you move on? And what I learned was that although he's been clean so long, like the program gave him a life that he never had. Mm-hmm. And now it's about carrying the message to somebody like me. You know what I mean? Giving him a hug at the door when I'm just literally spiritually broken, like almost, like the dying really is how bad I was. And I didn't understand that, but I think that with drugs compared to alcohol, it happens quicker because you're brought to your knees faster and you're likely to die quicker, as to where alcohol is more of like a slow process. Yeah. And I think plenty of your neighbors, are they, typical diagnosable addict, substance use disorder? I'm not sure. But do they probably justify it and drink more than they should because they've done well in life? Yeah. So hopefully that answers like that kind of question. You know what I mean? With all the bottles and stuff like that. I thought it was funny when you said it was, it's probably like good wine and high end spirits.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, they feel better because they're drinking like cognac fucking.
Yeah, you're not walking by and seeing fucking Yellowtail in there,
Chianti wine.
I'm like, damn, dude, that's a lot of money these motherfuckers are spending.
Yeah, it's
So then the question I have next is, and I don't know how, I guess to explain this, but what's the difference between an addict and somebody that has a bad habit?
Great question. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, and I thought a little bit more about it. The way I described it to you and that I've described it to other people in the past, plus one more element I'm going to add into it, is that an addict compared to somebody with a bad habit, I've noticed, usually drinks or uses to escape some sort of negative emotion towards themselves, from whatever it might be, an abuse, or they just don't like themselves, or whatever the issue is stemming from. They usually are taking substances to, get outside of themselves, to change the way that they feel. As to where somebody with a bad habit, like I was explaining, they drink or use to enhance their mood. They don't necessarily hate the way they feel. And there's people in my family and people I see, friends, that fall into this category. It's bad for your body. It's a bad habit. You know what I mean? But they like themselves. They're successful. They do well, but they drink to enhance their mood. It takes them up a notch, and they look forward to that.
We've talked about this before, and we mentioned it in the first podcast, that there's a difference between escaping what you want to see less of and celebrating what you want to see more of.
That's good.
And we've talked about the dangers of escaping what you want to see less of, but we didn't touch on why sometimes it's dangerous to celebrate in excess. Maybe you can touch on how that can become over time problematic when, even though you're celebrating what you want to see more of, it could lead you down a dark path.
Well, yeah, I definitely will touch on that. And that kind of brings up the question, like, it's like the chicken or the egg. What comes first, the substance or the addict? You know what I mean? Is addiction deeply rooted in your brain? And from what I've learned about the science of it, the treatment center I went to last, Glen Bay, had somewhere in between a physician's assistant and a doctor. I forget what his title was. It talked about the neurology of addiction. And as I understood it more, it's like like a brain disorder. You know what I mean? And not to get too crazy into it, but are you born an addict or do you become one? So somebody like that, who starts off just celebratory drinking or recreational cocaine use or smoking a lot of weed or whatever it might be, it might not be out of control, but they might become obsessed with that feeling of rewarding themselves. You know what I mean? And then it could turn into a major problem. You know what I mean? I don't think everybody, it's like a different path into addiction. What I've noticed that really separates the two, you know what I mean? That can really, like the normies, we call them in recovery, compared to an addict, is that an addict cannot stop once they start. Once they take the first one, they lose control. They lose the power of choice. Somebody like, a family member that I'm thinking of, he's able to drink and he'll get messed up and have a great time, but he's able to put it down. He won't need it the next day. When I go, it's like all or nothing. I don't we convince ourselves, I've convinced myself during times that I've relapsed that I'm just going to take one. I'm just going to take one, and it's never gone that way. I lose control, and it's a humbling thing to admit the powerlessness, you know what I mean, of it. And that's like what the first step is in recovery. But, I think that the real issue is with somebody like Zach's described, that, they become addicted to that reward for themselves. You know what I mean? It's like a delusion. It's like a justification. I earned this. I deserve this. As to where an addict's like full of guilt and shame. Like, I'm a terrible person. You know what I mean? They're hiding away. Most people who are going relapses they're hiding in a room because they've been introduced to recovery. They know they shouldn't be doing it. Therefore, they're ashamed. But somebody on the other end, they'll probably just convince themselves that they deserve it. Yeah. And that can lead to, just unmanageability in their life. This is the way that I look at it. And that could lead someone into recovery. It's like you described, like all different sorts of spectrums. Like some are sicker than others is something that they say in recovery. And, like I had a roommate at the three-quarter house. I still live in sober living to this day. I've been there about 18 months and I'm currently looking to move out, which is exciting. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I didn't rush it, man. I was like, I did everything statistically, inpatient treatment, sober living is the best chance to stay clean. Yeah. Long-term recovery. I went that route. I was like, whatever it takes, you know what I mean? But my point is I've had roommates that were like, just like, Dewonke was just like a pothead, you know what I mean? And they kind of bust his balls a little, he kind of gets like busted out like, oh dude, you're an NA for weed, you know what I mean? But hey,
you can be addicted.
The third tradition of Narcotics Anonymous is the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using. That's what it is. You don't have to, it says in our readings, we don't care what or how much you used, who your connections were, only what you want to do about your problem and how we can help. So whether you're a stoner that doesn't want to smoke anymore, but has trouble stopping, or you've been smoking crack and shooting heroin for 25 years, you get treated the same way. You know what I mean? The process and the steps are handled, you go through them in the same way. You know what I mean? So try not to compare and contrast, but there are some that are worse off than others. You know what I mean? But it ranges. So I think my point is that you have to make the decision. You have to look yourself in the mirror and decide, am I an addict? Do I want to do something about my problem? What people do is what we talked a lot about yesterday, and so much of my work this time, they say that the 12-step program is an ego deflation process to where you think of yourself less, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you think of others more, you know what I mean? You become less self-centered, more God-centered, more people-centered. And I think that what happens is that we want to say he's worse than me. I'm not as bad as him. You know what I mean? And that could prolong your problem, which is a real issue. But you compare it to me or somebody else who did worse drugs, and you just justify it for years and years.
Yeah. I mean, I could definitely see that in somebody that does have that outward success.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
Somebody
definitely.
that could have the outward success and be like, okay, yeah, I do drink a bottle of wine every night, but I own this successful business.
Yeah.
But, I can still take my kids out to X, Y, and Z, but
sure.
I still have a good marriage. But in the end of the day, that's just justifying a behavior that they know is wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I have to bring my dad up as an example. And my dad is very disciplined, self-disciplined, successful man, came from very humble beginnings and made a great life for himself, but always had drinking as a vice. He had a year sober on December 3rd, which is very exciting. Awesome. And it's great to and he's my hero, my inspiration. But he was like, how could I be your hero and inspiration if I do everything you look up to, but I still drink while you're clean and have struggled with addiction. So I remember this recent Christmas, I got him a book on recovery. He doesn't really go to meetings like I do, but it's more like his own process. He's become more spiritual and he works out a lot, and that's just how it's just been his path, which is fine. Multiple paths to recovery. But he got emotional on Christmas morning because he was like, I didn't ever think I had a problem, but I did. You know what I mean? And I've never been happier. So you have to make that decision. You have to accept the fact and take responsibility for your issues, or you'll never see it as one. You know what I mean? And are there worse drinkers than my dad? Absolutely. He didn't come home and pound whiskey, but when he drank, he went crazy. And to him, his life became unmanageable. He had some injuries and got in some trouble, and the pain became great enough for him, and he wanted to change. So those are really the only requirements for, it's like, who is an addict, who's normal, this and that. If you're ready to get help and you're having trouble stopping and you're justifying it in your brain and it's an everyday thing and you don't feel good without it, you probably need to take some sort of action, So that's...
No, that makes perfect sense. So would you say, you brought something up that I kind of want to dig a little bit deeper into. You said the pain became unmanageable and it was time to change. Mm-hmm. Is that typically how people get involved in the recovery process? Something happens, an event, a rock bottom, if you will. I've heard that before.
For sure.
A rock bottom, and it's like, holy hell, I got to do something completely different, because the pain of me continuing this substance is greater than the pain of me actually stopping it.
Yeah. That is what brings people into recovery. They say there is no bottom. It's when you put the shovel down. That's like a saying in recovery.
Okay.
And that's just the way that it is. When you're ready, you're ready. You know what I mean? You could run your life into a point where you lose your family and you end up in prison or something, or you could have multiple overdoses. Maybe that's what it is. Or you could just your family's disappointed in you, and that's enough pain, And, the people who put the shovel down earlier, are better off. There's no reason to keep running your life into the ground. But some people, man, they just have such a tolerance for pain with addiction. I see older guys in recovery just can't stay clean. I'm 30 years old, and you'll hear from somebody who's 50 who relapses and has never been able to put more than maybe a couple months or maybe a year at some point. They'll be like, get this thing now, man. You don't want to be like me. You know what I mean? And I just think to myself, I don't want to be like you. I don't want to be dealing with this at 50 years old. But what is it going to take for you? When have you had enough? You know what I mean? And I think sadly what happens is if you don't nip this thing in the butt at a young age, you just become jaded and become accepting of the fact that this is who I am. You know what I mean? It's you get used to the chaos, and that's just such a dangerous life to live, because most people die. The reality, you probably won't even make it to that age if you're using heroin or street drugs, because they're so dangerous anymore. Like we said with the alcohol, it could go on longer. But I think that most people have, it says in our literature, in the basic text of Narcotics Anonymous, that when the pain becomes great enough, we'll change. And whatever that event is for you is it, you know what I mean? But so few people get long-term recovery that they don't really surrender, you know what I mean? Even after a traumatic event, they continue to use. And It's very sad, but
Sad, yeah.
can't do it for them. You know what I mean? It comes down to the same principles that you guys live by with fitness and business. It's self-discipline. You know what I mean? That's it. Like the number one thing of recovery is not work your steps, not call your sponsor, it's don't take anything no matter what. And that is a level of self-discipline that 90% of people in recovery lack. They can't get through the moment when the drug presents itself unexpectedly or it seems appealing. You know, their brain is going haywire. I'm stressed, or I want to enhance my mood, whichever one it is. However they twist it in their head, I want to take something. Me and my sponsor always talk like what you do in those moments will separate the men from the boys. You know what I mean? It'll separate from, why can't I get this? Why am I a chronic relapser? To, I'm a long-term recovering addict and I haven't used in 2 decades. You know what I mean? Because everybody's had a moment where they were teetering with it. And what you do in that hour or however long it is can make or break your life.
That brings up a good point. Jordan Peterson talks about addiction as like a positive feedback loop.
Okay.
And it's whenever the medicine becomes the cure, or whenever like the drug becomes the cure, that positive feedback loop is initiated. And you kind of talked about that just a second ago, about how it's in those moments whenever you're not exactly where you want to be, that your mind flips to that cure, that you immediately think back to what got you there in the first place. What did you implement in your life to break that feedback loop? What do you do now whenever that moment arises, when you're stressed, or it could be anything really?
That's a great question. And I have a really direct response with that. You have to, like, the one when I got a year clean, like somebody, and I had this answer before, but they usually ask, how'd you do that? And you give like a little speech about, you know, I did everything everybody else did. You know, I went to meetings, I got a higher power, I called my sponsor, but someone said, why'd you do that? You know? And in those moments, I took some of this from my counselor at Glen Bay, some of it from Tony Robbins in his book, Awaken the Giant Within, like these, and the way he's talking about it is why you want to succeed. You know what I mean? Not how you're going to do, but why is your, what's your why? And I've implemented these, like really powerful, emotional, like references when that thought or that time has come up that I draw on to get me through it. And I have a negative one and I have a positive one, like a dark one and a light one. And the dark one is I think about my mom like burying me from addiction, you know what I mean? From an overdose or something like that. And I'm like, I cannot do that. You know what I mean? Like I cannot use hers. It's not just about me. Addiction is a rippling effect. You know, it's like you put a drop in the lake and like everybody gets hurt from it, you know? And I think about that and I think about Adam. I'll talk a little bit more later on. My best friend, Adam, who passed away, not directly from addiction, but either way, anyway, my point is that his mom really struggles without him. Of course she does. It's her only son. She loves him. And I think about her and how tough it's been without him. And I think about my mom the rest of her life would never be the same. My mom's very, very close with us. Me and my brother, she's a very loving, you know, almost consuming mother, which, you know, at times it's like tough, but it's a blessing, you know, who doesn't want a mom that loves them, you know?
Sure,
I got to be careful what I complain about because some people don't have that. But I think about her and my dad burying me, you know what I mean? I literally visualize it. I literally see me in a casket getting buried into the ground and my mom weeping. And it's powerful, you know what I mean? I get like the chills thinking about it because that could be the reality. And then I turn the page and I have my positive emotional response or reference, which is something like this. In the past, it would be me going back to Glen Bay, where I went to treatment 2 different times, and speaking into the entire population. I'm like, I have to do that. Like, my message is powerful. One of my assets that I've learned is I'm good at speaking, and my lead is good. You know what I mean? Some people kind of stumble and they get nervous. That's a strong suit of mine, and I give a good lead. And I was a leader when I was in there because I had recovery in the past. You know, I knew more about the program and about recovery than a lot of these patients. So I'm like, days I'd think about using, I'd be like, I got to speak at Glen Bay, man. Like, I can't pick up. Like, I got to do what I said I was going to do. Like, I got a goal, I got a mission. And those 2 things really would push me through. And I would be like, and then we go into the just for today, one day at a time mantra that we talk in recovery. I'm like, I'm just not doing that today. You know what I mean? Like, we'll reevaluate maybe tomorrow kind of thing. Like, who knows, whatever. But right now, today, like, I'm not giving in. You're not getting me. And it's kind of like badass, like competitive, like fuck you, addiction. You know what I mean? You're going to tell me to go into the worst part of the city and get a terrible drug. I'm like, I'm not going down that road. And then those are the best days in recovery. At the end of the night, when you lay your head down on the pillow, it's like this win. And as you continue to do that, you prove to yourself that like, I don't have to give in to the demands of my addiction. Like I can be in control, and I can kind of team up with a God of my understanding and a sponsor and get through those moments. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So
there's a couple things I want to bring up there that kind of reference some of the old podcasts. And it's crazy because it seems like as we get further down these podcasts, there's rules to the game, man. There's rules to the game, whether it's beating addiction, whether it's growing a business, whether it's building a great body, whether it's building a great marriage. There's rules to the game. And I'm starting to find these commonalities. I'm excited in another 50 podcasts when we can really distill this. But one of the commonalities that it seemed like you were alluding to over the people who attain recovery and stay recovered is discipline. And Wayne talked a lot about that on our last podcast. He said you have to cultivate the skill of discipline and hard work.
It's like my favorite word.
Oh,
I love it. I'm like, let's go.
Yeah, for sure, dude. And it gets me fired up too because it's true. Like the people that you look at that have, a great business, a great body, a great marriage, whatever it is, they have a tremendous amount of self-discipline. They've built it up over the years, so they're made out of iron.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't feel it.
Right.
It doesn't. It's just that it doesn't fucking matter.
Right.
The second thing I thought, and we talked to Bobby about this a lot, is when you're drawing on your emotional reserves, it's good to have that light side. It's good to think about your dreams. It's good to have like for Bobby, he wants to be the world champ. That's what he wants. He thinks that, he visualizes that.
Yep.
He wants to manifest that. But there's also something that I think a lot of people are afraid to lean into, but I think it's just as powerful. You shouldn't spend all your time there, but you should spend time there. And that's the dark side. It's being able to lean into those dark emotions that can drive you forward when you really need the emotional reserves to do something you really don't feel like doing. I have to do it in business, man. I have to do it in business. Because when I bought the gym in the middle of the pandemic, there's a lot of people that were like, dude, this is crazy. It's not going to work. Like, you're nuts. You had what you were doing was great. Why are you trying to do this? And then during the pandemic, when people were saying, well, hey, because I wasn't getting paid rent by a lot of people, right? My business was shut down. My cash reserves were going down and my bills weren't going down.
Of course.
And what I hear from somebody specifically that I care about was maybe it's time for Alex to get a real job, right? I lean into that, dude. Like I went and boxed yesterday. I was boxing hard as fuck. Come back and I'm thinking, I'm like, yeah, there's a piece of broken equipment. I'm like, I can wait till tomorrow. And it sounds weird and it sounds stupid and it sounds benign when we're talking about something that's as large and prevalent and damaging as addiction. But I had to lean into that dark side a little bit. I'm like, no, that's what this guy wants. He wants me to go home tonight. He wants me to just relax. I had a hard day. I just boxed. I'm tired. Fuck that.
That inner bitch.
Crushes that voice.
It's always chirping at us.
You need to have a little bit of that dark side. I'm not saying you should spend all your time there, but I'm saying that what you're doing right now, when you have those moments and you're leaning into that dark and the light, I think both of them combined are so powerful.
Oh, they are.
To instilling and driving forward and cultivating that self-discipline that's necessary for either growing a business or beating addiction. So I wanted to touch on that because it dovetailed so well into the last several podcasts that we did. Like I said, there's rules to the game of success. And we're trying to distill that in this podcast. We're trying to get these rules to help everybody in this room, as well as the people listening, drive the needle forward on their life.
I mean, those are great points. It's so true. You know what I mean? It's like we talked a little bit yesterday and I was thinking about this. I was going to share about this. I've read a lot of good books this year, personal development and recovery books, you know what I mean? And I like to, I read fiction too, to kind of like let my imagination go. But the books on personal development, I mean, they all come to like similar conclusions. And I was saying to you yesterday, like, if you don't have it figured out, what you got to do to succeed in any aspect of your life, like you mentioned, business, fitness, addiction, recovery, whatever. If you haven't got the message after a couple of these books or whatever, like you're just like reading to read, man. Like the it's cut and dry, you know, that it just starts with self-discipline. You learn that the brain is wired for like a soft, easy survivalist mentality. Like we want to be like warm and comfortable. You know what I mean? It's like you yesterday, I worked hard. I'll go home and like relax. You know what I mean? But like the men amongst the boys, the people who I am drawn to in my life, the winners that I have in my circle, they're able to conquer that inner voice. You know what I mean? And they're able to say like, and I reference Tony Robbins again, because cognitive behavioral therapy, which is really all he does, is a big part of recovery. You know what I mean? That's like kind of what the program is, you know what I mean? But like people just don't realize that. But he jumps in like a cold tank every morning, you know what I mean? And his saying is, I've never woke up and like been excited to jump in this cold tank. You know what I mean? My inner voice, my little soft, squeaky voice is stay in bed and be comfortable. But his thing is, when I say go, we go. You know what I mean? And that's become a saying that I've used. When I say go, we go. You know, stay in bed, don't go to the meeting. You know, sit on the couch, don't go to the gym. I'm like, no. I listened to this voice too long, for too many years, and it ran my life into the fucking ground. You know what I mean? And for the first time in my life, we shared yesterday, I have this affection for myself. I like myself. I love myself today for the first time since I've been a kid, because I'm finally doing what I say I'm going to do. And, you know, that goes into the pick your hard thing that we talk about, like that one way or another, there's going to be pain in your life. You know what I mean? But one avenue will pay you a price later. You'll get a reward. The other one will seem easier in that moment to stay on that couch, but you'll pay down the line when you're in bad shape and you hate the way you look, when you're using again and you hate the way you are. You know what I mean? Instead of doing what you needed to do in that moment and seeing the dividends reap later, you know? So once I learned that, I'll share a little story with you real quick. Once I learned that, it all changed for me, because I realized I didn't have to answer to my brain, to the negative aspect of my brain and my addiction anymore. A story I'm going to share, I was at treatment July 2021, the last time I went, and it would have been early August. My clean date is July 30th, 2021. That's my clean date. My birthday is July 23rd, which is cool because it's bittersweet. I'm a year older, but then I get a new year, new time clean. It's cool. But I remember reading that book. The book actually that drove this was the 5-second rule by Mel Robbins. And she's a lady, and she talks about how motivation is bullshit, like what we're talking about, how self-discipline is what it has to be. There are days where we're motivated to work out and stuff like that. I know you guys have done the Murph challenge a lot. You know what I mean? Yeah. Maybe like that first time when everyone's doing it, you're a little motivated. But times after that, man, it's discipline that carries you through that.
The third month at 5 a.m. when it's cold and
like
outside.
You ever been like, I'm super excited to do this? Like, no, you know it's going to suck, but you do it anyways, and that's the victory. But I was walking out of the auditorium after it's like a big lecture hall there. It's a really high-end facility. The Cleveland Clinic runs it. And everything, I had my 4th step I was working on in recovery, which is a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, where you focus on your character defects as well as your assets. You look at resentments you have with people and what part you played in it instead of blaming them your whole life. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's what the 4th step is. You'll hear about the 4th step in recovery. It's really like a big deal. I wrote 28 full pages on my 4th step. You know what I mean? Everything from issues with family members to... I use a step working guide from NA. They call it the Flat Book, and there's questions, and it's really, really good. But anyways, I had procrastinated on my step work throughout my recovery, and I relapsed over and over. So I'm like, I got to work on my 4th step, man. Like, it has to get done. And I was walking out of the auditorium, and everything in me was like, go left to the outside to like play volleyball, and like, I don't even smoke, but you're in rehab, so you're like smoking some cigarettes. Like, you're bored, you know, have a cigarette and like talk to some people or whatever. But that other voice in my brain, there's a meditation room down to the right, and it's a real nice, like, serene room. I found a lot of peace in there, and had a lot of like great moments in there. And it was like, go to that meditation room and get back to work on your 4th step. And in that moment, that was like a real distinct moment where I took control of my life because I went right. I went to the meditation room. I didn't go left. I didn't let my brain tell me go take that easy, soft. That was your pick your hard thing. And I wrote my 4-step, and I did that every day for about 5-6 days, and I finished it, But that was just kind of like an example of a crossroads that I had, you know what I mean? Where I took control of my life, and it might seem simple, but it was a big moment for me. Yeah, so.
It's building self-confidence.
Yeah.
And this is actually something that I learned from Alex years ago. People think that you look at somebody and you're like, wow, that guy's really confident. He must have been born that way.
Yeah, right.
But that's not the case.
No,
It's that the confidence is built by keeping promises to yourself.
Oh, so good. You're so right.
And I think about the times in my life whenever I don't feel as confident, because it's not like you're not a certain level of confident your whole entire life.
No.
It's a swinging scale. There's times, at least I think, when you can be more confident and when you can be less confident. And I think about the times in my life when I'm less confident, and it's directly attributed to the way that I'm acting towards myself.
Oh, for sure.
Did I let something little slip? Did I compromise with that small decision? Well, that's why you don't feel as confident. That's why you don't feel as adequate, because you let those small things fall through the cracks.
It's such a good point, man. I mean, it's the truth. I love how you said it's not like built. Like somebody might be like a stud athlete or whatever, like tall and handsome or whatever, so they like maybe have more natural confidence or whatever, but let that person neglect their responsibilities and they'll fall apart too. They'll start to resent their self, compared to somebody that maybe was born with less or not as naturally gifted or whatever it might be, but they do what they say they're going to do and they work their ass off, and they're going to end up having that confidence that puts you in the zone. Like lately I feel like I'm in that zone, and I've been in it for a while. I fell out of it in the fall because I stopped working out. You know what I mean? Fitness is like a huge part. I mean, it's like what you guys do. We're all athletes, and you guys know better than anyone that like I told my sponsor, I'm no good without it. You know what I mean? I start to crumble, and every time that I've stopped working out, I've relapsed every time. Wow. And every single time I've stopped working out, my brain goes to, what else do I know to feel good? You know what I mean? And for me, that's drugs. That's just what drugs and alcohol. And I was able to catch it this time because the pain became great enough. The self-discipline, the pick your hard came up. I was like, it's harder for me to sit around and hate the fact that I'm not working out, my muscles shredding off my body, and that I'm talking a big game about self-discipline in meetings, and I'm not even going to the gym. You know what I mean? And one day I was like, when I say go, we go. And I went, and I've been back for like probably 6 weeks now, and my confidence is back again. You know what I mean? And I lost some muscle and this and that, but that's another area that I've worked on, is not being so hard on myself. It's like when I reach out to Alex to train with him, March of, it'll be 2 years in March that we started working out. And I was humble enough to admit that I didn't have the discipline on my own. So I was willing to pay to be trained, because I knew I had to suit up and show up and work out with him. I wasn't going to let him down. I wasn't going to spend the money and not go. And that's why, that helped me so much, and why it's invaluable if you can't get your ass in the gym or whatever like that. It was like having a fitness sponsor, recovery. I have a sponsor that helps push me. Like I needed somebody to push me, but, whenever I started like back on that journey, it's like, I just, you put so much work into, doing something to come and work that hard. Like, it's just such a terrible feeling to like stop working out, or like get off your grind and be like, I put in all this time and effort and all this. And I think that is what saved me from like just not getting back to it at all. You know what I mean? Although it was like a lapsed 2 or 3 months in fitting and working out, I knew that's where I belonged. You know what I mean? I've proven to myself that's when I'm at my best, and when I get in that zone. You know what I mean? And I don't know. That was kind of like a side point, but
no, I think you're right. I think fitness is so instrumental, and it's a catalyst to so much change in your life. I've always said, if you look good, you feel good, you perform well.
Oh, for sure.
And not only that, it gives you a natural rush of endorphins, and you're cultivating the skill of discipline when you're building your body.
That's the best example.
It is, because there's so many days you might wake up, oh Christ, I'm sore as fuck. Like, there's no way I'm going. But then you go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's so much that fitness can relate to. Like I said, rules of the game, right? The fitness translates so well if you let it to business, which it sounds like dovetails very well into recovery.
Yeah, same roles. Yep.
So I think all that's excellent, and I think that's a phenomenal 50,000 foot view on addiction, and I know we reached somebody with that. Now I want to talk a little bit about your journey specifically.
Sure. Yeah.
So now one question I had is about growing up, in your youth, how, whatever, if something happened, if there was an event or a choice that you made that you can look back at now and be like, okay, that influenced me later in life, that may have but influenced your propensity for addiction.
Yeah.
If there's any event or anything specifically growing up that may have influenced that, and how you would handle that differently now, having the skills that you have. Because there's people that might not be addicted to something now,
Right.
but they may have something going on in their life that they should handle a little bit better to prevent substance abuse, addiction, or bad habits in the future.
Right. Well, the way that I kind of will illustrate it is one specific instance, not really what it is like when I share my lead and like in my notebook, like I have like a template for my lead. It's examples of like the ego and like the self. They say the core of our addiction is self-centeredness. We're so obsessed with self and how we're perceived and viewed that we just like have a distorted outlook on reality and on people, and it cripples us. You know what I mean? So what I'll share on with your question for that is a few specific examples where like the ego was pulling me and dividing me and from people, you know what I mean? To where I felt isolated, and drugs and alcohol just became my outlet to escape that. You know what I mean? And we talked like way long before the drugs. I was in first grade, obviously. I hope nobody's getting high in first grade. You never know. But I was taken out of school and I was tested, like my IQ, and I was tested for, in Franklin Regional, where I went to high school, it's called SAL, which is like advanced classes. You know what I mean? And what happened in that moment is that, I made it into SAL, you know what I mean? Some of my friends didn't, you know what I mean? And Franklin Regional is a really good school. There's a lot of smart students, a lot of foreign students. I had plenty of classmates that went to Ivy League schools and really nice kids. But what happened for me was, that was the first time that like I felt, well, let me start by saying this. The book I read in treatment was called The Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. And what I learned from that book is that the ego, everybody thinks of it with like this like grandiosity aspect, to where like it's like big-headed, I'm better than you ego. But the ego works in the other way, this lesser than ego, where you feel inadequate to people. And they're equally as dangerous, whether you feel better than or worse than, you know what I mean? As long as it doesn't have you centered and in the middle and okay with yourself, the ego, the self-centeredness is kind of doing what it wants to do. You know what I mean? And that'll rip a person apart, because I lived that. It ripped me apart. So what happened was I was like, yeah, I was in SAL, but I was like dumber than all the smart kids. You know what I mean? In my eyes. But I mean, I was smart. I was in SAL. I shouldn't have been comparing. I was there.
Right.
But I'm smarter than the regular population. You know what I mean? And that was like the first instance I had where like I felt different. You know what I mean? I felt separate. You feel special or whatever else, and you're just kind of lost. Am I special? Am I different? Like, no, you're not. Yeah. Sorry, hate to break it to you. You just have some issues. A lot of people have that feeling. I hear in recovery that like they felt different or they felt special, and like, I hate to break it to you, you're just not. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that you don't have purpose in life, that you don't have things to offer, but you're not like, you're not that great and you're not that bad. Get over yourself kind of thing. But that was the first example. And then, like when I talk about my childhood and recovery and then my lead, like it was fairly normal. Like I played basketball. That always kept me on a straight path. I was a good student. I was well liked and popular, and you know what I mean, and girls and all this and that. And like that was another ego thing, because I was, good at things, good at most things that I did. But then like came like, you hit puberty and like things get weird, you know what I mean? Like in middle school. And then like you start to like the ego came up again with like, comparing yourself to other guys, you know what I mean? Am I'm better looking than him and not as good looking as him? Does she like me? Does she, and like women and like all that stuff came up. And I started to drink and, to just be more comfortable with myself. And that was at 13 was when I had my first drink. And then I just felt like that social lubricant to like be like mainly around women, you know what I mean? To be comfortable with women, to make a move or whatever it might be. I felt like I couldn't be comfortable without alcohol, you know what I mean? And, so I think that was like just the whole aspect of wanting to be accepted. And my brother was a grade older than you and his friends, and they all partied hard and drank, and I wanted to be cool with them too, So that was another instance to where I'm sure everybody struggles with that in early adolescence and puberty, where they want to be accepted by the opposite sex or whoever they're attracted to, an older guy, older friends, and they want to be cool, but they might go about it differently. For me, alcohol was my answer. That's how I did it. I thought it was normal. I thought it was normal to like chug alcohol. Like I went to my dad's hunting camp when I was 13, and that was the first beer I had. And like most people might like try the beer, but like I had 4 and I puked on myself in my bunk bed. You know what I mean? Like those are the early answers to like, I'm an addict. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have an off switch. Like, oh, this is gross. Like I'll have one and have a buzz. 4 beers then, like might as well have been drinking a half a case as an adult. Like I was sick as a dog and I puked on myself. And, but guess what? I loved it. You know what I mean? I loved the way that I felt from that alcohol. And from 13 to 28, I used probably 95% of days of my life, whether it be, it progresses the addiction from alcohol to marijuana to, cocaine and then, opiates, party drugs, all kinds of stuff. It got worse and worse. Obviously it brought me to my knees, but, that was like where the substance use really started to take off and where I started to think that it was like the answer, you know what I mean? Like that's the feeling I've been looking for, you know what I mean? And then the next event that's like an ego example is one day I was walking through the hallway, and it's funny because I had an appointment this morning for my epilepsy. I have temporal lobe epilepsy. It's a very rare type of epilepsy. It's called neocortical temporal lobe epilepsy. It occurs on the outside of your brain. And I was walking through the hallway one day and I had this like deja vu like spell, man, where I felt like I had like been there before in my life. And it was so strange. It's to this day, it's so hard to explain. I've had many, many seizures like this, but it was like I had been there. When have I seen this? It's like that, dude. It's like you're literally like, it feels like you're like flashing in from a past life, and you see like patterns of light, and you're like a viewpoint. Like you're just kind of like, you just kind of like a view, like everything's blurred around you. And I'm like, this is intense, man. You know what I mean? It's like a fucking acid trip or something, Yeah. But they misdiagnosed me with a panic attack disorder. And that was a big problem because I went to my childhood doctor. I told him what happened. And my childhood doctor, my pediatrician was on my 4th step in recovery because I resented him for not sending me to a neurologist and a specialist. I resented this guy. I'm like, why would you not send me to a neurologist? I'm describing like some really out of body like experience. And you're just like, oh, you have panic attacks. Let's treat you for anxiety. So what happened was I had this placebo effect that I was anxious, that I had panic attacks, and I'm treating myself for that. And I'm not, I'm epileptic, So it just created this confusion in my brain. What am I? Why am I anxious? And I just kind of like, it's amazing what the mind will believe, or I'm trying to think of an example I heard or whatever, but it's like what it can like, I had a panic disorder. That was what my brain taught. That's what I was told. That's what I was treating. And it like developed because I was told that I had one, but in reality, I had misdiagnosed epilepsy. So I went throughout my high school years having these mini seizures in the hallways and in the classroom, you're walking through, and then I would get real hot and sweaty, and I'd be panting and I'd be exhausted after, but I'd have to like snap out of it and like go into like trigonometry. Like, it's like I should have went to the hospital, or I should have been treated in a different way. So that was definitely an example to where I really started to feel like pulled apart from the crowd, really, really badly. Cause I'm like, does anybody know what this is like? Like it was just like this really out of body experience. And that messed with me for a while. Eventually I went into a full grand mal seizure. What happens is it stays localized in that temporal lobe. It's a simple seizure. A complex seizure is where it spreads to other parts of your brain, gets into your frontal lobe. And then I had more of like a traditional muscle convulsing seizure. And then I was properly diagnosed. And that was March 13th of 2012 that happened. And then it's funny because the following year was March 12th of 2013. I had a seizure almost a day apart. And then we started to look into the seasonal allergies, and is that the reason? And it got all crazy. But those are really to answer your question, Alex, the main points of, maybe not one specific event, you know what I mean? Like, but just where the ego attacked me, the self-centeredness, I felt different, less than, better than, and the way I handled it was substances. So.
Got it. Yeah, that's exactly what I pulled from that feeling of inadequacy from Sal, feeling different because you were isolated from your friends when you went into Sal, not centered.
Yeah.
And alone.
Yeah.
I starred that one. You said, does anybody know what this feels like? Right. And you basically, you coped with those feelings with at first drinking, and then it kind of went and brought you to your knees.
Yeah, for sure. Progressed.
So for somebody that's feeling that, they feel that aloneness, they feel that inadequacy, they feel different. What are some things that they could do to basically break down that ego that you're talking about so they don't go down a dark path, a potential dark path?
First and foremost, you have to accept the fact that it's just not true. You know what I mean? You're not that bad or that good. It's hard in that moment. I think it's even harder in my mom's an 8th grade school teacher, and like these kids are so obsessed with their phones. I don't want to get into that. I'm not like, I'm on my phone too much, but we're kind of this generation where we saw the rise of technology. We had like a little bit of more of an organic childhood with, doing things that I think are more traditional, but we also got to enjoy the come up of video games and phones and whatnot. But I think it's so dangerous even in today's day and age because there's so much comparing and contrasting. Like my little cousin, I'm not gonna say names.
Yeah.
She's like 8 years old, man. She's like, I have anxiety. I'm like, what do you mean you have anxiety? You're 8 years old. It's like riding around my neighborhood on a bike. Like, yeah, there'd be things that would work me up. But I was basically like, when I think back to my childhood, it's another state-changing technique. This is kind of like a side example of like when I'm like going to like a dark place. Like it's another cognitive behavioral therapy tactic to where like you imagine yourself in like a really happy setting. You know what I mean? I always think of Happy Gilmore, like go to your happy place. But I do. I picture myself in my neighborhood growing up, like on bikes with my neighborhood friends. And it's just like this sense of euphoria, like a slight, like it kind of floods me for a minute or two. And, but I just think like, somebody like that says she's anxious at like 8 or 9 years old or something like that. I think that they're at more of a challenge to compare and contrast. I mean, it's definitely been an issue throughout history. There's books written on the ego. You know what I mean? Like obviously people have always had this issue. I think it's worse than it's ever been. But I guess my advice would be like in the nicest way possible, like get the fuck over yourself. You know what I mean? Like just you're not as bad. You're not that bad. You're not that good. You don't have to be like him. You don't have to be better than him. Just kind of stay in your own lane. Find things that bring you fulfillment. You know what I mean? And, just try not to let that like eat you alive. You know what I mean? Like take it from me, man. Like that brought me, almost died from it. You know what I mean? Really almost died. Becoming so bad with addiction and suffering an overdose, literally almost took my life from me because I was battling that for so many years. And, I didn't think it was going to go down that path of that bad of an addiction, but it all stemmed from that comparing and contrasting. And, it almost took me out completely, so I would just say, just don't think of yourself like, don't think of yourself so much, think of yourself less, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Less self-centered and help others and just kind of, that would be the way that I would combat it.
You mentioned a really interesting point there right at the end of helping others, of like moving in a posture of service. Mm-hmm. Can you like elucidate that a little bit more as to why that's important?
Yeah, definitely. The 12th step in the recovery process is, it says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to addicts and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Carrying the message is like that's that reciprocation. You know what I mean? That's that person with 2 days helping a person with 30 years. Me calling my sponsor, the example, like the service work example I'll give for recovery is like when you're early in recovery, like you kind of feel like a burden. Like I got to call this guy every day. Like he's busy, he doesn't want to. That's a self-centeredness. You know what I mean? Because what my sponsor said to me one time, which was like a profound moment. It's not my sponsor now. It was my old sponsor. You you might have the same sponsor forever, but if it's not a perfect match or you find somebody or whatever, like I had a temporary sponsor, then a second sponsor. Now I'm on my third sponsor who I've had for a while. But what the one sponsor said to me was, you owe it to me to call me because you helped me get another day clean. And when he said that to me, I stopped feeling like a burden. And I looked at it as an act of service because that's the reciprocation that comes in recovery, the one addict helping another. He got 30 years by helping people, and by him helping them, I help him, and I stopped looking at it as a bother. And I started to look at it as, wow, I help this guy stay clean. Me calling him is helping save his life and helping him stay clean. And service work is like really, really pushed in recovery. Every Sunday, the first Sunday of every month is area service. It's held in Oakmont for NA. You take service positions like, they say when you're asked to speak, you know what I mean? Like, and I look at this as an act of service, like I shared in the beginning. Like, you're not supposed to say no. Like, I got asked to speak on a Thursday in a meeting in McHugh Sport like 2 weeks ago, and I had to work, and I hadn't been speaking a lot, and I didn't want to go. And part of me was like, the narrative in my head was like, call this person and see if he can get somebody else. You know what I mean? I've only done that one time, and it was because I needed to work steps with my sponsor, not because I wanted to go sit at home. But I take it upon myself that when somebody, it's an honor to be asked to speak. That means they like what you have. You've shared something that is impactful. They want your story. You know what I mean? And, that's one of the purest forms of service in recovery is when you're asked to give back and asked to speak, you go. You know what I mean? Somebody canceled. My sponsor takes a meeting into Forbes Hospital the third Monday of every month. He has a service position. They call it H&I in NA. It's hospitals and institutions. I just went up to Armstrong County Jail and took a PREA class. I'm able to speak at the jail now. I haven't gone yet, but those things are really another thing that separates the men from the boys. Most people who have stayed clean a long time have really been actively involved in service work. And my sponsor called me a few Mondays ago, and he said, this so-and-so girl was supposed to speak for me. I haven't even heard from her. I said, well, who's going to speak? He said, well, you are. And I was like, no question. I'm in there. You need me, I'll be there. You've done so much for me. These people are in a psych ward, which I've been to a psych unit. And so I went, and I just think that not only does maybe it'll help somebody in there, hopefully I reach somebody, but I know that's going to help me get another day clean. Like guaranteed I bet if you were to run a percentage count of people who have relapsed on days that they got to speak that night, it's very low. When you got an active service to commit, you're like, I can't, I have something to hold up to.
Yeah.
That's why it's important to put yourself like in those positions.
And it breaks down the ego.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, for sure. It definitely does.
It breaks down that feeling of being so self-centered and focusing on, everybody's looking at me, or,
right.
My boss thinks I'm doing a terrible job,
yeah,
or this person thinks I'm doing awful, or I am doing awful.
Right.
It breaks down that loop of negative self-talk and ego.
Exactly.
And allows you to focus on service.
I just thought of an example when you were saying that. Like, I thought of you when you moved your gym from the bottom up to your new facility, and like that day where you guys moved everything, you know what I mean? Like, the people that helped you do that, that's like an act of service. They may be employees or friends or whatever, but like at the end of that day, it's a good example because it doesn't have to just be recovery service. Like me helping my dad chop wood less. Rarely do you have a day where you commit an act of service. Not rarely, never, that you go to bed or that you don't feel good at the end of the day. Like, it might stink while you're doing it to lift all those heavy weights or chop firewood, but like you feel like you accomplished something and you help somebody. And it's like a win, you know what I mean? Like, and you don't think back. When was the last time you were laying in your bed like, remember how hard that day was? We moved all those weights. Like, you don't think like that. No. Like, it seems so hard in that moment. But that task, like, humans, I think, like, put so much emphasis on how difficult something's going to be, but like, it's never as bad as we think it's going to be. And when this act of service is complete, it's a win. You know what I mean? It's like a win for everybody. I know you guys like had like a little party up there that night. I remember when you told me you guys had a good time and everything was finished. That's just an example I could relay to you, to where like it seems like a shitty job to do, but I bet you guys felt pretty good when it was done. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Kind of thing. And the people that helped you probably felt like they felt good about it, like they were a part of something. So
I think it helps reinforce like that sense of purpose too, and like echoes that light that you were talking about between like the lightness and the darkness. Like I bet whenever you were done chopping wood with your dad, you weren't like, wow, like I have a worse relationship with my dad.
Right,
now.
exactly.
Or whenever you went to speak to that meeting, you're like, wow, I want to go like relapse.
Yeah, right.
Same thing with those guys that helped us move the gym.
Yeah.
I'm sure like when they were on their way to help serve, they weren't like, I'm gonna leave this gym tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna quit coming to this gym tomorrow.
Exactly.
It strengthens the bond to your purpose.
Yeah.
It strengthens the bond to what you're doing whenever you know that you're doing it because you want to, not because you're getting something in reward for it.
Yep, exactly. It's just, like when you take action or you do something, like you're just always better off after. You know what I mean? It's difficult during it sometimes. And like we were talking about the motivation thing with like Mel Robbins and how motivation is kind of nonsense and self-discipline is what carries you. I love days that I'm motivated. It's fun. Like I love a day where I really want to go to the gym. You know what I mean? Like I ride those days out, I'm feeling good. My body feels good, or I want to go to a meeting or whatever. I really do enjoy those days, but there are more days that I don't want to do it. And, it's easy to do it when you're motivated, but the real winners do it when they're not motivated. And that's back to that self-love. You know what I mean? That confidence that you were talking about earlier, that's when that comes back into play. And I just think that's just like, I'd say today's theme, like to me, like the saying I keep saying, like what separates the men from the boys. You know what I mean? Whether that be recovery, business, fitness, spirituality, whatever it is. And it's self-discipline. And like this sort of grittiness, you know what I mean? Where it's like, I'm in charge now. You know what I mean? My brain doesn't tell me what to do. Where so many people, I think, fall into that trap of they listen to the narrative, that inner, Joe Rogan says that like when I conquer that inner bitch, like when he goes and works out real early in the morning, everything's screaming at him to stay in bed. But it's like, fuck you, man. Like I'm going to do this. And that's just like the best feeling.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like really.
When we say go, we go.
Yeah, that's it. When we say go, we go, man. That's my mantra.
Getting back to your story specifically.
Sure. Yeah. Let's get back.
You said there is a point in every addict's journey.
Yeah.
Where the pain of continuing to use is greater than the pain of actually getting treatment.
Yes.
What was that moment for you?
That moment for me, well, just like to do a quick timeline. The drinking and marijuana was like throughout high school. Afterwards, I could have played college basketball at like a Division III school. Would have been a good choice. Would have kept me disciplined. Always kept me on track during the winter months, which can be tough for people in northern states. Yeah. But I didn't. I went to WVU and I did nothing. I failed out. That's where I started. That's where I did cocaine for the first time. When I moved back from WVU, I got arrested. I was selling weed, and the state police raided my house and kicked in my door. You know what I mean? And that changed my life forever because I still have a felony on my record because of it, which I'm working on getting dropped. That eventually led to me to my career as a chef. You know what I mean? So it's like I see how the path to success or happiness isn't linear. I never saw it at that time as a blessing, and it's still, I'd rather not have the felonies than have them. But my point with that is that after I got arrested, I was placed on house arrest, and I would know when I would get drug tested. So I weighed my options with a few times I was dating a girl and I went to her house. I remember I can literally remember this so distinctly. It's like, I don't remember the first time I smoked weed, which is strange because I was a really big pothead for a while. But I remember the first time I took a Vicodin, and I went into her like other bathroom. It was a big house, and her older grandmother lived with her, and there was like just a script of Vicodin on the thing, man. And like I took those 2 Vicodin, and that was it for me. Like it wasn't like when I got physically addicted, but that was the feeling that I had been looking for my entire life. So I thought that was this warm, blanketed feeling, and people who have done opiates will describe a similar experience to where like all my problems just like melted away. You know what I mean? So I thought, you pay the price later. What goes up, what you go way up when you're high on opiates must come down, and you get your ass kicked every time. It'll always win. But at that moment, that was the cure to my anxiety, to my stress, seizures, you know what I mean? Anything. It just like was the feeling I was always looking for. And from that day forward, opiates were always something that I sought out, but they were kind of difficult to find. I wasn't going to go do heroin after doing 2 Vicodins. I was always seeking out pharmaceuticals. which were like difficult to find. It's like you have to find like an old person or like, it's just difficult. But from that moment on, I was always trying to find pills. I never really got addicted till years later. But what happened during house arrest that progressed my addiction was I knew when I would get drug tested, so I weighed my options. The bracelet I had on tested for alcohol, so I couldn't drink, scratch that off. I couldn't smoke weed because it stays in your system long. You know what I mean? Like maybe you could hit it once or twice and get away with the drug test, but I wasn't going to sit in my room. It smells. I was living at my parents. So that scratched that off. I wasn't going to like sit in my room and like do cocaine by myself and be all like wired out. It didn't seem enjoyable. And I wasn't going to sit up in my room with an ankle monitor on and like trip on hallucinogens. Those are like the drugs I had done. So opiates were like the perfect example. They got out of my system, or the perfect answer to my problem. They got out of my system in like 3 or 4 days. They were like it's like a relaxing high where you can just be like in your room by yourself and be content no matter what's going on. And I was working at the country club, Westmoreland Country Club, where I was caddying. And one of the workers there sold Perk 30s. You know what I mean? Oxycodone 30 milligrams. Like the street nickname is Perk 30s. I think Roxaset is like the drug name itself. They banned Oxycontin, snortable Oxycontin pills like in the mid 2000s because they were being abused. But the Perk 30s are a little blue pill for anybody that doesn't know about them. They make them in other milligrams, 15 or 20. And I started buying them off of him, and I'd get a couple at a time. And that's my drug of choice. When someone said, what's your DOC? Percocet 30. Eventually I went on to harder opiates out of desperation, but never. The story's always the same with opiates. I started with pills. I went to heroin. You know what I mean? Some people go to shooting heroin. I never did that. You know what I mean? I snorted it, but, so it continued to progress. But what happened was in 2018, I started to work at a bar, and it's owned by friends of ours, and I'm not going to divulge any names because it's not relevant.
Right.
But down there, the opiates were prevalent unlike I had ever seen. There was multiple Percocet connections, real Percocets. Nowadays, so many pills are pressed with fentanyl. People are dying from it. You know what I mean? I know you've heard of stuff with that.
Oh, yeah.
And I was selling weed again, and I was working bartending, bar backing, serving. So I was making cash every day, and I was selling cartridges and weed. And I just always had cash, and it was just like the perfect storm. The desire and opportunity met, and I could get plenty of pills, and I had the money to do it. And that was when the first time in my life I became physically dependent on a drug and became addicted. And I remember New Year's it would have been 2018 into 2019, my New Year's resolution, which is funny. It's this time of year, thinking back, like I'm going to quit opiates. Like I had been trying, I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I was up to like 10 Perk 30s in a day. You know what I mean? I used to get high off a half of one. And I remember the person that I was friends with, that we did them together, being like, yeah, I've done like 10 in a day before. And I was like, what, 10 in a day? Are you fucking serious? Like that's so much. But it gets there because your tolerance to opiates gets so high so quickly that not only eventually you're always kind of chasing that original high. And you always do kind of catch a buzz, but eventually it like taps out, and like you just need them to get through the day to function, and you'll get a little bit of a high. But I remember doing 4 Perk 30s in a line. You know what I mean? I'm like gagging this giant line of fucking drugs down and barely feeling high. And I'm just like literally like couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I'm thin and I'm losing weight, and my money's just, it's like when you're in active addiction, money's just like a drug ticket. It's like has no value. Now it's like I work so hard for my money. It's like, oh, I can't imagine just handing this to somebody that doesn't give a fuck about me. But when you have it in addiction, it's like, I'm so happy I have $200. Like, here, take it. Give me everything you have. But that was when the addiction really grabbed hold of me, and I was trying to quit on New Year's. And that was like my first moment where I was like, I'm completely powerless over this. Like, this thing has me by the balls. I cannot quit on my own. The good thing was that I was trying to quit throughout the year. I was taking less, and I was making attempts to quit. So I lessened the amount of opiates in my system. So when it came time for like the final detox, it wasn't as bad. You know what I mean? But eventually the Percocets kind of ran out. They were more expensive. Person who worked there, his roommate was on heroin, stamp bags, you know what I mean? And never in a million years, everything you think you would never become, the drug you thought you would never do. It has such a loaded word, heroin. I can't even believe I've done it. You know what I mean? To say it. but it's the easiest and most extreme line I ever crossed. Because in that moment when you're sick and the pills are gone, it's just like, this is cheaper and stronger. Like, I don't even care anymore. No brainer. You know what I mean? I have to have it. I can't get out of my bed. I can't go anywhere. I can't work. I have to have these opiates or I'm unable to function in society. And then you do them and you're all hyped up, and opiates have been said to give kind of like most people think of them as very sedating, which if you're sitting down, they are, you'll be nodding off, but they give you like a weird energy, like where you just like, you'll do anything. Like, I'd fucking dust your house for you on opiates, no problem. You know what I mean? Like, You'll just, you want me to clean the bathroom? Sure, let me do some opiates. I'll fucking clean the bathrooms. Like, and so the disease of addiction progressed, and I was doing those drugs and trying to quit, but it was June of this is what I'm getting to with the moment where it stopped. It was June 16th, 2019, and my best friend Adam Analik, may he rest in peace, he died. This is him on my chain made for him, just like a little piece to honor him. Adam was the only one that knew the extent of my addiction because I trusted him so much. And, just like a story I'll share with Adam, it was like March or April of that year where I had been trying to quit since New Year's, and I'm talking to him in my car. And I'm in really bad shape, man. Like, I'm really fully addicted to it was fentanyl. It says, you say heroin, but I got drug tested at rehab. There was no heroin in my system, just fentanyl, so dangerous. I'm doing at my worst 35 stamp bags a day, 35 stamp bags a day. If I did one stamp bag right now, it would probably kill me. You know what I mean? I was doing 5 at a time because your tolerance gets so high. And I was telling him, and he was having issues with substances himself, alcohol and cocaine. He was an addict. And it breaks my heart that he never got a chance to get into recovery because he was like a spiritual guy and he really would have thrived in the 12-step fellowship. I know that, and I live to honor him, and that's why I take it so serious, because he didn't get the chance to recover. But I remember talking to him on the phone in my car, and I'm like, man, I'm like so fucked up, man. Like, I can't believe I'm in this position. And I'm crying, you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm just emotional. I'm just a mess. I remember him like being like telling me, I thought his response was like, you got to get help, man. He was like, dude, you're like one of the most talented people I know. Like, you are like, you have, and I don't really like the word potential because that word has plagued me because I thought things would come easy to me. I was always told I had potential. That's a side point. But that was just the word he used. You have so much potential. He's like, dude, you're talented and you're just, you have so much to offer to the world. And like, I was like, what are you talking about, man? Like, I'm a heroin addict. Like, I don't have anything to offer to the world. But he believed in me when I didn't believe in myself anymore. You know what I mean? And actually I have like my list of goals or visions we talked about on my wall at my house. And the 8th one, the bottom one, says, I will honor my best friend Adam, who believed in me when no one else did and when I didn't believe in myself. And that's what a best friend is. So what happened was I was playing golf on June 16th, 2019, and I got a call that he died. He got in a fight with his girlfriend, who I had to work on this resentment with her because I couldn't stand her. I never wanted him with her. I don't know what happened to this day. There's still some speculation about how it went down. But anyways, he like punched a window after a fight and it cut his wrist and he bled to death by himself because she wasn't at the house. And that's how he died. And it's tragic. It's very sad. And he got robbed of his life. But that was the moment where, since he knew my deepest, darkest secret and it died with him, I knew I needed help because I couldn't continue to live with this on my own. And when he passed, and that's the great thing about the program, is it's such an honest and open program. In meetings, you get to share stuff like this that normal people, you just wouldn't say to somebody because it's too deep for them. But I had that relationship with him. And when he passed, that was a determining factor to when I was like, I got to get help. I got to get this off my chest. Another week or two went by after he passed, and I was really depressed and I was really in bad shape. And I remember leaving his funeral viewing in Penn Hills, running down to the Shop and Save below the funeral home to get stamp bags because I was sick. And I had to be a pallbearer the next day. And I was like, I cannot carry this casket if I don't have drugs. You know what I mean? And I remember crying, carrying his casket, crying because I'm sad that he's gone, but crying because I was so dead inside. You know what I mean? And just, I obviously had some glimmer of hope that I could get better. I wouldn't be here right now. I would have given up, thrown in the towel. But I remember looking at that casket, like, I'm going to end up in this and they're going to fucking bury me. You know what I mean? And some lady who has since passed, like, who I didn't like from high school, was like a kid I went to high schools with, mom. She like hugged me and was like, we can't have any more of this. I would never want you to be next. I don't know if she knew something about me. I don't know if she got word that I was a drug addict or something, but it was like, I didn't really like her at the time. And I was like, fuck you, lady. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it hit me in the feels. So I ended up checking myself into Western Psych in Oakland about 2-3 weeks after his death. And that was the first time after all this time, my parents were really concerned, but they didn't know I was doing opiates. They were like, they had known I had done cocaine and drank. They thought maybe I was doing cocaine. I was skinny. I'm thin now. I'm fit and thin now. I'm 205 pounds. When I got weighed at the psych ward, I was 164 pounds. So shed 41 pounds off me. You know what I mean? Like, I was fucking skin and bones, man. I remember trying to bench like 105 in rehab, and I was like, I couldn't even move it. I'm like, oh my God, I was so weak, dude. But not until I got down to the psych ward did I come clean about the addiction. Like, and my ego was still intact. I couldn't even say I'm a heroin addict. I said I'm addicted to prescription painkillers. Like, I just couldn't say it in front of my mom. Obviously, she knows now. But for a while, I just like, it sounded better to say painkillers. Like, I just couldn't accept the fact that I was on these drugs, you know? So I went in Western Psych, and I stayed in there for like 4 or 5 days, and I detoxed, you know what I mean? And this is an important part, like, that I want to share on with opiate withdrawal, is the worst thing I've ever been through, especially during grieving the loss of your best friend. I had some spiritual moments in there. I had a dream before I went in that me and Adam were in Oakland, and like, he went down over this hill. And in the dream, a bunch of people, we walked out of the Peterson Event Center. I just thought of this, and they went right. Adam went down over the hill, and he was like on it, what would be like in the dream, like an escalator. It was like the sidewalk, but it was like gradually moving him. But he was facing me, but his back was going like away. He was going down this hill gradually, and he like put his fist up at me, and his fist eventually like disappeared over like what would be like a horizon. Mm-hmm. And when I got to Western Psych, my exact view from my room was at that spot from the dream. And I'm not like too like, you know, crazy about that stuff. You know, I don't get like overly like meant to be spirit, but that was a strange, that was like a spiritual moment for me. I don't know what the reasoning was, but for some reason it really stuck in my mind. And I felt some sort of comfort because I had that dream, and I was like, okay. But my point is that leading into, like we talked about earlier, with that dark and light, what happened to me when from going through opiate withdrawal, which I was always kind of going through it. As you're addicted, you're sick until you get it. You know what I mean? You're sick until you get high. You know what I mean? But really, like, physically, like days of actually going through it, where you have these shaking tremors, dude. Like, my body's squirming. Like my legs cannot stay still. Like, the worst moments of my life. And not only is the physical aspect terrible, where you're shitting and you're throwing up and stuff, like, it's the emotional aspect, because your brain is so depleted of dopamine and serotonin that you literally cannot feel joy. You know what I mean? I remember days I was withdrawing at home, and I would just hug my dog, because it was like a dog, you love your pet. It was like the only pleasure I could find. And it wasn't even pleasure. It was just like a little bit of comfort. And like, I slept with my parents' dog. I don't live there anymore, but I slept with him last night, and like, I'll give him a hug, and I'm like full of gratitude that I can lay with him. And like, he brings me joy, and it's not like I'm not in this desperate state. But what I've done with opiate withdrawal is I call it like a superpower, especially in the gym. When I'm in like a really hard workout, like with you, like, this guy's workouts are serious, which they're serious. And it changed me working out forever, because I realized, you get into the David Goggins stuff, I have a reserve tank. I realized I could work harder than I thought I could, especially from working with you. I'm like, there's more in my tank. I can push myself harder. Our brains have these governors, you know, to where like, I'm done. There's too much pain. I'll stop. But we can push through that, you know, and I know you guys do that all the time. But what happens is like, maybe it's a heavy squat, or it's the Stairmaster, just a hard cardio or whatever. It's just a tough workout. I'll think, I made it through opiate withdrawal, lost my best friend. This is not harder than that. And I dig into that reserve tank, and I get through it. So I've been able to take that negative experience and use it as a sort of fuel. And whatever it might be, a tough night at work or situation, I always reference that. And I'm like, I made it through that. I can make it through this. You know what I mean? And I've been able to, It's like a superpower, you know, because to me, nothing's harder than that. Nothing will ever be harder than that, you know. Scientifically, my brain has no happiness. It can't be harder than that. You know what I mean? I could go through the most traumatic experience right now, but my brain still has regular levels of dopamine and serotonin. It won't be as bad. But when you were coming off opiates, it's just like nothing. You're just like a cousin of death. You're just like right there, you know? So that would be the moment, you know, where he passed away. And, I still struggled for years, you know. The most time I was able to accumulate before this 18 months was 87 days. You know what I mean? I lied to people and said that I had 6 months or a year because I'd get away with a high. You know, I wouldn't get caught. The ego tells you, why would I admit that I got high? I didn't get caught. You know, you can't recover like that. I've learned that. If you're lying about your clean date, forget it. You're fucked. You know, I know people who have done that. Doesn't work. But you know, so I went to 5 treatment centers in 2 years. And this last time, man, I suffered an overdose in May of 2020 by myself on the walking trail in Murraysville. My parents like found out that I went and got some drugs. I hadn't got high in a while. I had a real low tolerance. They came down and confronted me. I like ran into the woods. I did these drugs. I did like 2 stamp bags of fentanyl in like an abandoned car off this walking trail in Murraysville. And I remember getting out of the car and going down into the woods, and something hit me when I was in the woods where I was like, I got to get up towards people. Like I'm going to die. I was going out. I knew it. I was like starting to get foggy vision. I knew that overdose was a reality. And I had never overdosed before where I lost consciousness. One time I did where I was puking and I was like thought I was going to go out, you know what I mean? But I didn't. And I remember like something inside of me, like it'd be like getting shot in a war where like, I don't want to die here. You know what I mean? Like this fight or fight kicked in, and I thought of Adam for some reason. I remember this very distinctly. And I was like, I got to get up to this walking trail because I'm going to fucking pass out and fall out and die. I got to get near people so somebody can save me. That's literally what I was thinking. And I like trudged through the stream at Duff Park, you know, it was like up to my knees. And then like, you know, like those roots that like stick out of the ground that are like real solid. You can never like tree roots. I like grabbed a couple of those, pulled myself up, and I couldn't get over the fence of the walking trail. I dropped down on my belly and I slid underneath it. That's the last thing that I remember. But I didn't lose consciousness then. Apparently this guy saw me walking around the side of a building, and I don't even know where his house was because there's a lot of commercial real estate there. There was somebody who had a house, and he said he saw me, and I was like stumbling and mumbling, and he was like, "Hey buddy, you okay?" And he told my mom later, because she went down and thanked him, that like something in me, he's like, I'm not like a real religious guy, but something like told me to go check on him. Like I just like had a bad feeling. And he walked around the corner and I was laying in the dirt, you know, turning blue. Mm-hmm. And I called the ambulance, and like when I get high, I have a tendency to like pick pimples, and I like had been like popping shit on my chest. You get like real, it's just like a fucking side effect. But I had like some pick marks on my chest. So they thought I got stung by bees. And it's funny because I am allergic to bees. So they hit me with an EpiPen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they put a breathing tube in me to keep me alive. They get me into the ambulance, and they like get me to the hospital, and they were like, "Oh, we think he's having a bee attack allergy." And the doctor was like, took one look at me. He was like, "Did you Narcan him?" They're like, "No, what do you mean?" He's like, he's dying. He's overdosing. Like this is an overdose. This isn't a fucking bee attack. And they Narcan me, and I came back to life. They gave me 2 shots of Narcan. Crazy to think about. So many people die, you know, I was dead, like literally, like that's like the reality of addiction. And if somebody's listening to this and they're struggling, you know, there's only 3 ends to addiction, and it's jails, institutions, or death, or the positive alternative recovery. That's it. You're going to end up in jail or an institution, a psych ward or a rehab over and over, and you're eventually going to die, you know, or you can recover, you know what I mean? Those are really the options. So, but I continued to struggle for years until I went to treatment this last time when I relapsed in July. I got fully addicted again, physically addicted to opiates for the first time since that June time. I like had relapse throughout the recovery. And the intimidating thing to me about addiction is I was never fully out of recovery. I always I was still going to meetings. I was still in, but I wasn't all in. And if you're halfway into recovery, like addiction will win that battle. You know, you got to be all in is what I learned. So when I got physically addicted again, and I went through withdrawal again in July 2021. And I just remember being in my bed and just being like, how did I do this again? how did I forget how painful this was that I put myself in this situation? And that was when I was working out with you. You know what I mean? That was like, we probably finished in June or May or June of one of our 10 sessions. And actually, my relapse started like while we were working out, which was really strange. Like, I think I've justified it a couple of times. Like when I'm real sore after a workout, I remember in the past I would take like a Percocet after a workout, and it was like a reward. And I think that's how I justified it. One day I was real sore, and I was like, I need fentanyl to feel better. Like, come on, dude. You know what I mean? Like, take some Advil and do an ice bath.
Yeah.
But the relapse had started, and it was after we had been working out, and I was like getting in better shape, and I was starting to build my body, and it sheds muscle off you when you relapse. Like, I lost like 15, 20 pounds, and I was down to like 180, from like 205 to 185. And the important thing about this time is that I learned that you can't save your face and your ass at the same time in recovery, the ego thing. And I just didn't have time to even hide it. I called my parents. I was crying on the phone. They're like, what's wrong? I was like, I relapsed. In the past, I would have hit it. But I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't care if you're upset. I need to go to treatment. I know what I need to do to get better. And that was a big moment for me, because I stopped trying to save my face and I started to save my ass. And I went back to rehab and just made a decision that time, this last time in treatment, that I was going to do whatever it took. I knew I had this self-discipline, that dig deep mentality, because I had put it into basketball at times in my life. Going into my senior year of basketball, I worked so hard to get better, and I had done it with fitness at times. So like, some people have never grinded at anything. Like, I knew I had like this grit, and I was like, I got to put this into recovery. And I was like, you know what? I said, I'm going to take this program so serious. I'm going to do every single thing that's told of me, suggested of me. And I remember thinking to myself, this better fucking work, because I cannot take this anymore. I cannot live like this anymore. You know what I mean? I don't want to live like this anymore. And lo and behold, I've done everything that was suggested of me, and here I am clean, 18 months later. So it's like back to that confidence to do what I said I was going to do, and to see, because you start to wonder after you relapse, can I get this? Am I too addicted? Am I sicker than these people? Why can they get clean and I can't? You know what I mean? You start to compare and contrast.
The ego creeps in.
It creeps in. But I came back to that competitive nature that it's instilled in me that I have. I'm very competitive, to where I was like, if this fucking guy can do this, then I can do it. If he can get clean, then I can get clean. He shot fucking dope for 20 years and smoked crack and all kinds, worse than me, worse addiction than me, and he's clean. If he can do it, I can do it. And I stopped making excuses, and I started putting the work in, and the results just came, and I just haven't looked back since, so that's basically the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of my addiction and into now my recovery. Like at a meeting, you say, hi, I'm Luke, I'm an addict. Or that's like the traditional way. Hi, I'm, blah, 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 I'm an alcoholic. I'm Luke, I'm an addict. If you're an AA, it's alcoholic, whatever. It's kind of stupid, like how they like mince words. It's kind of like a Republican, Democrat thing.
Distinction without a difference.
Yeah, but I say, I'm Luke, I'm a recovering addict. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because there's an active addict, there's active addiction, and then there's a recovering addict. And a lot of people say that, not just me. But that's what I am today. You know what I mean? And my life has been so great this year. It's the best year I had of my life since I've been a kid. And it's just not possible without recovery, And I just want people who hear this message to know that it's not a fantasy. It's possible to live and enjoy life without the use of drugs. You know what I mean? They say that 50% of your brain, like the levels of serotonin, dopamine, like certain stem cells, I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like I know the exact terminology in science. I don't. All I know is that they told me that 50% of your brain repairs and heals itself within the first 90 days of sobriety. 90% of it comes back after a year. So that year mark, like, I don't know if they knew that whenever they came up with the program or whatever, but like they put a lot of emphasis on getting that 1 year clean. Like at meetings, it'll say anybody with a sponsor and a home group, which is a meeting that you like are of service at, raise your right hand. Anybody with a year or more, raise your left hand. And like, I love being able to raise my left hand now. Yeah. It's like, I'm in a winner's circle, or they'll have you stand sometimes. But after like I got a year clean, like I saw that happen. Like I'm able to get so much pleasure from things out of life that I didn't think was possible. Good food. You know what I mean? Like just good music and a book, like something like some old person would do. But my brain has reset itself to where like I'm able to find pleasure in things that I became so accustomed to this unnatural rush of dopamine as my only source of pleasure that I couldn't find pleasure in everyday things. You know what I mean? I lost pleasure from now, whether it be golf or fitness or good food or cooking, which I love to do. It's a big part of my life. It provides me with enough of a dopamine drop that like I'm fulfilled. You know what I mean? It's a great feeling.
There's so much that we can unpack from your story that you shared, especially with your friend Adam, and that was very powerful. One of the most powerful things I've heard. But one of the biggest things that I was able to extract from that is your sense of purpose that you have, how strong your sense of purpose is in your life now, even to the extent that it's written on your wall, that you look at it every day, that it's not just your purpose, that it's a part of your identity. And James Clear writes a book called Atomic Habits, and he talks about how
Never read it,
every action we take is a vote towards the identity. Every action we take is a vote towards the identity that we are trying to create.
Oh, wow.
And your identity is written on your wall. And every day, whenever you show up to these classes, whenever you sit down and you talk to people and you give back in a podcast like this, you're casting votes towards your identity. And you're honoring your friend Adam. It sounds like that's one of the big things that you live. That you live to serve is your friend.
You're right. No, it's true. It's, being a recovering addict is first and foremost, I'm that before I'm anything else. Because if I'm not that, I'm nothing. My sponsor says, like we'll talk about me having a restaurant in a couple of years, which, like when you set your mind to something, you can be done. Like you're like, I'm going to have a gym. Like I'm going to have a restaurant. Like I don't say like, maybe it'll happen. Like I'm in the next 3 or 4 years, I'll have my own restaurant. Like that's a goal of mine. I know I'll get there. If I've been able to do other things, I can do that. But what he says to me is, like he'll be like, Luke, I'm not going to say that you will have like a successful restaurant if you're in recovery, but you definitely won't have one if you're using, kind of thing. You know what I mean? And the saying in recovery is, if you're using drugs, you're giving up everything for that one thing. And today I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to give up everything, the love of my family, the support, financial stability and progress and all that for that drug today. I'm just not willing to do that. So, I would rather have all those things than that one thing. And like my sponsor will use like an Adam and Eve like example. Like you can do anything in this beautiful garden. You just can't pick that apple. You know what I mean? Like, Luke, you can do anything you want in your life. There's just one thing that you cannot do, and that's use drugs, Because if you do, like you count everything else, any dreams or goals or aspirations you have, write them off, man. They're not going to happen. And that's like a powerful reality, that another one of those emotional reasons, like everything I've dreamed of, everything I want, like kiss it goodbye just for this short-lived high that's going to go away in fucking an hour I'm going to depend on. Like when I speak at rehabs, like I get a little more aggressive into the people. Like at the psych ward, it's more of a softer approach. But at rehabs, like I'll literally be like, what a fucking cop out to your one life. You know what I mean? To take this easy fucking bullshit way out where you get high as your only source of pleasure. You know what I mean? When there's all these great things you could do with your life. And that's the route that you want to choose. You know what I mean? I'll be like, fuck that, man. You know what I mean? I'll say that in my lead, and I'll see people like tear up almost because they're like, it's this sobering moment, no pun intended, but where they'll be like, wow, like I don't want to waste my life fucking doing that. You know what I mean? And they'll come up to me after and say, they got something out of that. But it really is the purest, primest example of evil, short-term, instant gratification, what feels good now. Like it's just, addiction is just the, rawest example of that. And, that's not the person that I want to be, it never was, but doesn't discriminate. It can grab a hold of anybody. You know what I mean? It's nothing to be ashamed of to be an addict. But another thing that I say to people, I'm still managing the sober living house, and my roommate relapsed recently. And what they'll do in recovery is a little bit soft for me at times. You relapse, you get a white key tag. It's a 1-day We do clean time at recovery where you celebrate 1 day, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 18 months, and then multiple years. And like somebody relapses, they get their 1 day key tag and everyone gives them a hug, keep coming back. It's all right, buddy. I don't fucking do that, man. When somebody relapses, because somebody said this to me after a relapse and I needed it. He said, you know what? He said, what the fuck are you doing, man? You know what I mean? Like, you're going to fucking die and ruin your family's life. He's like, you're better than that. I had somebody say that to me. And I was like, I didn't need a little hug and it keep coming back at that moment. I needed somebody to be like, listen, dude, what are you doing? You're ruining your life. You're better than that. And I said that to my roommate yesterday. And I said, don't beat yourself up. That's another thing. Don't put the baseball bat down in the corner after a relapse. It doesn't serve you anything to fucking sit in self-pity and wallow. I'll give you a day to beat yourself up. Get back on track. Go to a meeting. Actually, I'll give you like a couple hours. Go to a meeting that night. If you relapsed, let's just establish one thing for anybody that's listening to this. And my counselor said this to me, okay? They're all multiple paths to recovery. The most proven and effective method that's readily available across the world in churches all over the place are 12-step fellowships. So if you don't accept the fact that a 12-step fellowship is your best way to recover, this is what my counselor said to me. He said, just be careful what you promise your loved ones. If you're not on board to work the 12 steps, be careful what you promise the people you love. Because, and I was like, it was like a dagger for me because I was always involved in 12-step fellowships. But some people think that they don't need them. They think they're weird or they're a joke or that there's other ways that can become buku religious, and maybe you can. But the best proven method for recovery to stay clean are NA or AA. You know what I mean? And what the other thing he said was, say you're drowning in the ocean from your addiction and a lifeboat comes up. You know what I mean? Like, there's parts of the program that I think could be different or that I don't love necessarily. But he said to me, don't not get on board the lifeboat because you don't like the color or you don't like the driver. You know what I mean? Like, don't look at the few things you don't like about the program and use those as a reason why you don't go. You know what I mean? Like, this is a readily available, put $1 in a basket if you want to. You don't even have to. Anybody's welcome program in churches and in recovery centers all across the country. Every single day, there's an NA and an AA app you can get on your phone. We'll show you where the meetings are, what time. Don't run from that because you find one or two things you don't like. You know what I mean? So anybody's listening, best statistical way to get clean long-term recovery is long-term inpatient treatment, 30 days in a facility. That was so important to me because you have to interrupt that pattern of living. To go away for 30 days, I would say this to people in treatment who are complaining. I would say, this is a fucking privilege, man, that your insurance company, you're able to take a 30-day break from your work, from your family, from everything else and do nothing but just work on your biggest problem. This is not a burden, dude. This is a privilege. And when I started to look at treatment instead of just addiction, and I started to look at it as, I give a lot of credit to my counselor. This guy's like one of us, like, he's just super hyper-focused, awesome guy. He was like, just look at this as like personal development camp. You're here. Your biggest problem is addiction. You're here to handle it. You know what I mean? It could be somebody, it's like somebody like an overweight camp, you know? Stop thinking about the drugs and the addiction, he told me. You're here to handle your biggest problem. And it's a privilege to be able to do that and step back from all the life's responsibilities. That's why inpatient treatment is so important. You interrupt that pattern, no cell phones. You get into habits of reading books. It gets you on a regimented schedule. They always have fitness centers. It gets weight on you because you're eating 3 meals a day. It gets you introduced to the 12 steps. There's meetings every day. So rarely have I seen a person get clean on the street where they come into an NA or AA meeting and get a 1-day tag and they stay clean. The majority of people who have stayed clean went away. Then the next thing that increases your chances is sober living, where I went. You know what I mean? A 3/4 house or a halfway house, which can be humbling because you may have to live in a room with another grown man. You have to sign out on a board. You have to take drug tests. You have a curfew. You can't bring women back or whatever. Like, that's a humbling thing to think. But it's just a sacrifice. It's just a year or a year and a half or 6 months, whenever you feel you're ready to go. If you're not court ordered, you can go whenever. And it's now kind of getting like a little bit reversed. I've gotten comfortable there. Now it's time to move on. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like it's cheap rent and no one bothers me and I do what I need to do and I've gotten comfortable. And we all know the danger of the comfort zone.
Yeah.
So it's time for me to step out and get a nicer place and have more responsibility. But long-term treatment, sober living, 12-step fellowship. If you do those things and you fully are committed and you don't half-ass it, you can recover, So
Sure. That's what I was taking notes on is the steps for anybody listening here that might be dealing with addiction or loved ones dealing with addiction. Yeah. First thing I have is you gotta destroy that ego.
Oh yeah.
Number 1, destroy the ego. Number 2, get into a long-term inpatient treatment.
Yes.
Find a 12-step program. It's proven to work.
Yep.
Cultivate discipline. Give back in the form of service.
Yes.
And take it one day at a time.
That's it, man. That's it's simple. The work is never ending, just like anything, just like business or fitness. It's never ending, but it's not complicated. They say in recovery, the saying is it's a simple program for complicated people. You know what I mean? You do all those things that you just mentioned, you help people, you get a higher power. Like I saw a joke online, like the worst part about getting into recovery is becoming religious. You know what I mean? It's like a joke, like, because I was always like really resistant to God. And like I was raised Roman Catholic and like I became rebellious towards that. But the way I look at it now, to have like some sort of God, I call it a God of your understanding. You know what I mean? Just like some greater power than yourself. It doesn't have to be a traditional.
It's humbling.
Theological God. It just has to be something you draw power from. And I used Adam at first. You know what I mean? My friend who passed away, like I used him as like a stepping stone. Like I felt like I could talk and communicate to Adam. Our brains are so powerful. Whether he can hear me or not is irrelevant. If I believe that he can hear me and that it's helping me, that's all you need. You know what I mean? Like I know how things work and how big the universe is, and maybe there is or isn't, something that directly cares about me. But like, as long as you convince yourself there is, you know what I mean? It's like, just buy into that and give it a chance. I don't know personally anybody that has a loving relationship with some higher power that's worse off because of it. That's what matters. Yeah. I don't know somebody that draws strength from a God of their understanding that is worse, like I said, is worse off because of it. It helps people, and I used to like bash religious people and this and that. Who am I? You know what I mean? Life is difficult. It's full of struggles. They need to draw power from something else, more go have at it. And that's what the second and third step are. The second step is, I'm blanking. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. You have to accept it. Like, I can't do this on my own. And for some people, it might not be a God. It might just be the rooms of NA. That's a power greater than you. Mm-hmm. Us three talking is a power greater than just me. You know what I mean? So some people use the rooms as their higher power. You know what I mean? And just that camaraderie and stuff like that. Some people use nature, and some people use a more traditional God, or some people use Jesus or Muhammad or whatever it might be. And then the third step is we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And that kind of thing is so important in recovery, because the way, like, I don't sponsor anybody yet. It'll be soon when somebody asks me to sponsor them. I just know it, you know what I mean? I've gotten good recovery, and it'll be one of these days someone's going to ask me to sponsor them. I'm on my 9th step right now. So once I get through all 12, I'll be like qualified to be a sponsor, because you got to work the steps. But what was I saying? So when I explained, somebody asked me about the third step one time in treatment. The human gut tells you so much. And the way I said, to understand like God's will, I said, when you think about something you shouldn't be doing, like there's a resistance, you know what I mean? You shouldn't be going there. Your gut will tell you that. But if you don't feel that resistance and it just feels like free and like you should do it, that's God's will. That's the way I look at it. It's your self-will. If you're like, you know what I mean? Like lately, like I've had some issues like with gambling, like nothing crazy, but like it's a form of addiction, and I've been gambling on sports and shit. I know, like when I'm on my way to play blackjack or put a sports bet in, like I know that's not God's will for me. He doesn't, loving higher power doesn't want me gambling my hard-earned money away, and I feel that resistance, but I do it anyways. And you always get your ass kicked. You pay a price for taking your will back. But when you follow God's will or a higher power's will or a loving will, you won't have that gut resistance, and you'll just you flow. You know what I mean? Like life flows when you're in that, when you live in that higher power's will. You know, you don't have all this resistance and self-resentment. And, you know, those are really, really important parts of the steps. The pathway to freedom is the steps. That's the freedom from the ego, the freedom from self. You amend your wrongs. You admit when you're wrong. If I do something wrong, the 10th step is we admitted when we were, I forget what it is. Basically, I know them all like off by heart, but sometimes it's hard to spit them out. But you promptly admit when you're wrong. If I tell someone to fuck off at work, what you sign up for in recovery is a high road, man. You know what I mean? A lot of people will tell someone to fuck off and they'll know they were wrong, but they won't have the balls to say sorry. When we were wrong, we promptly admitted it. I have to go up to that person and say, as hard as it might be, my bad, man. I didn't mean that. I was caught in the heat of the moment. You know what I mean? I shouldn't have said that. I have instilled that in my family. Like my mom, I'll be like, Mom, you shouldn't have acted like that towards Dad. You know, I'm not going to tell you you're an adult, but you need to apologize. You know, so there's just, the steps have just brought such awareness into my life. You know what I mean? That it actually makes it difficult to deal with. You'll see how lost in their own self a lot of people are because they can't say sorry. It all comes back to ego. They won't say sorry. They won't admit when they're wrong. They won't look at their defects of character. They won't try to remove them from their life. They won't change, you know. And I said that one of the sayings I say in my treatment, a few like powerful statements that I say are, one, the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using in the rooms, but the requirement for the benefits is a desire to start changing. I say that in my lead. I'll say it again. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using, but the requirement for the benefits is a desire to start changing. Until you really want to change the way that you are, you'll probably run into the same problems over and over again. And then one of the other things I say is that if you think the price of recovery is high, wait till you get the bill for a lifetime of active addiction. You know, and that's actually something I adapted from Tim Grover, who was Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's trainer, super awesome guy. And he says, if you think the price of winning is high, wait till you get the bill for regret. You know, and that's like, you know, I know you guys live by that kind of stuff, and it's just so true. You think the price of being a successful business owner, you know what I mean, or a successful athlete or a successful this or that is high. Wait till you get the bill for when you look back and you're like, I fucked this up, man. Like, that's the pick your hard thing, you know? So if you think the price of recovery is high, wait till you get the bill for active addiction. It's much worse, I promise, you know? But I hope this helped somebody today. You know what I mean?
It absolutely helped somebody today. Yeah. There's no doubt about it.
For
Luke,
sure.
I want to thank you for coming out here and sharing your story, man.
No problem.
I know
it's an honor.
I learned a lot from this. I know somebody listening to this has learned a lot from this, and I think we probably reached somebody to actually work on their addiction. Other than that, I think this is a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a privilege.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you.
That was awesome.
Yeah,
I really appreciate that.
Shout out Colin on the sound, killing it.
Hell yeah.
You guys are doing cool things here, man. And I always just felt like a good energy around you guys at the gym and whatnot. You know, you guys are winners, and I know that, and you're people that I have in my circle for that reason. And if anybody hears this that personally knows me, that's struggling with addiction, you know what I mean? You could reach out to me, you know, Luke McHugh on Facebook or on social media, or get in touch with Alex or whatever. Like, don't feel ashamed. Don't let that ego prevent you from helping, because you might not know where to go. You know, I'm just letting you know, whoever's listening, you can reference me and I can point you in the right direction and get your life back. You know what I mean? So
Awesome.
Godspeed. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Again, this is a More Complete Beast podcast. We're sitting here with Luke McHugh. If you're somebody struggling with addiction, I hope that this reached you. I hope that this helped you. This dovetailed very nicely into all of our other podcasts.
Good.
It's crazy. Like I said, we're the entire
recipe's
purpose.
the same.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, the parallels are.
It's crazy. There's rules
awesome.
to the game, man, and we're starting to figure them out here. So, again, Luke, I want to thank you. And other than that, we'll see you in the next episode.
Sounds good. Thanks, Alex. Zach, appreciate it.